Hi, everyone. It is the Ego Project. I am Lisa Heidel, and we have Christine Seidel, and we have our guest, Sarah Vrba, who's here with us and who is going to be talking about the ego and being an empath. We are so excited to have you, Sarah.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
for coming.
much.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm so excited. I love what you guys are doing here. And yeah, it's going to be a really fun topic to dig into today.
Oh, thank you. What we're going to do is, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read a little something I pulled from your website, Sarah, and then I'll explain why this so impacted me. And I think it's a perfect example of what being an empath is. Okay. So I pulled off from Sarah's website. She says, I'm an intuitive tarot reader, trained historian, artist, and internal explorer. I serve as a comforting, supportive bridge between this very practical physical world and the magical unseen world that resides within and around us at all times. Mm. She also went on to say when she was looking for someone who resonated with what she needed, I realized about a decade ago I was going to have to create that feeling in that community myself. Which is about being an empath and finding the right guidance. So Sarah, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about what that means to you and why you wrote that, especially that I love that idea about being a bridge. So what does that say about you?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think that kind of encapsulates my whole life trajectory, really, because I didn't really have language. As a kid, I wasn't very self-conscious about it, of course. But, getting into your teens and early 20s, it's like, there's this internal experience I'm having, and then we have culture and we have all these external things that are just chugging along like normal. And it really spurred me to seek out answers, ways to explore that, ways to connect with it and make sense of this internal experience I was having that didn't seem to be, as widespread, I think, in culture as it is now, thankfully. But at the time, there was very little. And so that's really been what's pulled me forward this whole time. And even how I ended up doing what I'm doing professionally over the last 5 or 6 years. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah.
What exactly is your definition of being an empath?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways that you can think about that. And I think often this experience is layered. Each empath is going to have, different reasons for why and how they're experiencing that. But I mean, it is that ability to be able to feel the energies around you and to pick up on them and to have those kind of extra feelers out. And I think that can be very different for different people. But yeah, a lot of times there's a lot of high crossover with highly sensitive people, crossover with people who've had maybe some stressful, traumatic events in their past as well. So it's a complex and deep topic. And of course, there are a lot of us who are just born with the extrasensory ability to sense and feel that energetic world. So yeah.
I think that's my take on it as well. That's how I see being an empath is you feel energies. It shows up for people in different ways. And so I know for you, one way that it showed itself, how you started finding the answers that you were seeking was through astrology and through tarot and through art. And so I'm very excited. I'm going to break those up. Actually, I'm going to flip them. So can you tell us about your path with art? Christine does art therapy. I'm a writer. So I'm curious about your path as an empath through art and what it's taught you.
Yeah, I think that was one of the gifts in my life. Like my mom was very passionate about me studying violin and piano and ballet from when I was like 3 years old. So I was always surrounded by expression and self-expression, which I think was such a huge gift to just have that forefront of my life. And then, of course, I was really lucky to go to like an arts high school. And so studying, music and dance while also doing academics. And so it's just always been there as an outlet, even when I didn't have language to understand maybe what I was experiencing as a highly sensitive empath who was having some psychic experiences and other just overwhelm. Art was the way that I was able to soothe and calm myself. I would just go to my room at the end of the day and I could just create a whole world and really connect with that hidden experience. So it's played a huge role in just, I think, keeping me grounded and connected.
I love that. That actually is such a component that I don't think that we really address enough for empaths is, finding that place of release, because that is what it feels like, a sense of overwhelm, right? Like you're receiving, you're processing, you're, compartmentalizing a lot of the energy and emotions that you're receiving from people you're around, either, just in a room or in close relationships too, as you learn more and more about, what's going on in their lives. And until you really know what's actually going on with you, that place of release or that place of expression is so important to be able to keep yourself well, and sometimes without even knowing what's happening with you, you just naturally need to go seek those outlets, which I think is something as a support, for people that are going through that process of reconnecting with being an empath is a huge piece of needing to keep yourself well during that process and then continuing for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it holds so much information, so many kernels of wisdom about yourself as well. It can kind of be a bit of a map that can lead you to some really great information about yourself. Yeah.
Sure.
And how often do you do art now? Are you still, are you a working artist? What is your occupation as far as art goes?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do most of my art for myself at this point, because I do the work of tarot and astrology. That is my bread and butter and what I do. But it's really interesting because I was very into like music and dance for most of my life, and painting and drawing was kind of more in the background. But in the last several years, that's been calling and getting louder and louder. And so I'm going on this whole other adventure right now that's very vulnerable. Diving deep into that. So there's this new form that's developing, and we'll see where that ends up calling me, because it's these last couple of years have just been the beginning, I think, of that. So we'll see. Yeah, but it's intensified and amplified for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
How have you learned how to listen to that call? Like, do you have a process? I'm a strong believer in resistance has meaning. If you're feeling a lot of resistance towards something, there's something really good in there. If you just can push through it, that's my process. So what about you? How do you answer that call when you feel it?
Yeah, I like your resistance. That's fun. That's very fun. That's a very useful way to notice. Yeah, I think this one takes so much practice. It really does. I think especially, I don't want to deep dive too into the gender component, but if you're a woman raised as a woman in our culture as an empath, you're going to learn to not listen to yourself. Yes. In many, many ways. And a lot of times we have to learn that skill in our adulthood. And for me, I feel like it wasn't until I got to be in my late 20s that I started to even get a handle on that. So, I mean, I've learned to listen to my body. It has so much good information that, we will just push to the side. So I will listen to that first. That will normally slow me down. It will, have me noticing if I'm feeling agitated or frustrated or something gets kind of kicked up. And so that's always my first cue that it's time to sit down and just listen for a while. And obviously also one of the best tools I have is just free writing. If I don't know what's going on, I can tap in pretty much immediately to what's going on just by sitting down with pen and paper for 10 minutes. So those are two really basic tools I think that helped me listen and hear
Mhm.
what's coming through, and to differentiate between what is something that's maybe going on with my own system and something that is around me or that I'm feeling that's not me. And I think that's another crucial part of it, is kind of learning how to distinguish. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that you said, taking that time out, like pausing, feeling that resistance, taking a pause and checking back in with yourself, checking in with your body, which is really where you're going for that authority of, hey, what's going on? I need to hear truth in this moment, and not what's swirling in my head or around me, but it is that pausing and stepping back for the check-in, which is key, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's amazing what even 1 or 2 minutes can do if you're having a busy day. And I think in inserting those practices that are small, not having these high expectations, can help build a better communication between your like conscious self and just all the energies moving around. You're more likely to go to it and say, oh, I'm having this experience right now, and be able to know what it is and tap into it a lot easier.
Yes. Yeah. Simple practices that don't create shame if we don't, do the big thing. Like every Saturday, I'm going to take the Saturday and check in with myself. Well, then this happens, that happens, right? But I like your simple practices that keeps us in a really good headspace too, that we don't start allowing things to creep in, that we should have done this or I should have done that. And so just keeping things simple and attainable, really.
Absolutely. I think having those massive, I'm going to meditate and like listen to crystal baths for an entire day. That is so, even just hearing that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds like a big homework assignment.
Right. I'm stressed.
Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. I've really, for me, the micro practices throughout the day have really like been the thing that has changed my relationship to that sensitivity and to hearing myself and hearing kind of more of the deeper guidance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And it sounds to me like you've done a lot of ego healing around what the culture has placed on us, because so often a lot of our our ego wounding happens outside of us very often, right, Christine, more than what we typically do to ourselves.
Yeah.
And so for you to say whether anyone understands this or not is irrelevant. I know this is important to me. I know it works. How did you get to that place where you were able to give yourself permission to listen to your body, to give yourself those, micro breaks, those micro reflections? How did you get there?
Yeah, I think I still have good and bad days with this one, honestly. I think especially being on the internet and doing so much work on the internet, there are days when that is easier and there are days when it is harder, which is just truly the honest answer. But I think it has come with, like I said, those micro practices. And then when I actually listen, to myself throughout the day, to those little calls and those urgings, it helps me realize there's an affirmation going on there. There's a positive feedback going on where, oh yeah, I was right to, take that pause and to listen into that. It does feel good to create this thing or to work on it from this perspective. And so I think it's been something that has built slowly, and honestly, just doing and expressing myself even a little bit before I was ready.
Oh yeah.
Because I can sit inside myself all day and say, like, because I did have a lot of shame about my psychic experiences and my high sensitivity as a teen that I did push down in my early 20s. And that was a hard time in my life with that divide. And so I did take work to kind of just be like, yeah, this is me. And it did require putting myself out there. And it's amazing. And I know that this has been discovered with shame and with the shame that so much is connected, shame and ego, right? These are such tightly wound, they work closely together, but it dissipates it in sharing it. And some of the things that I felt the most shameful about when I've shared it, that's where all the connection happens.
Absolutely.
So honestly, not doing it alone has been probably the thing that's been the most helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is, shame, Lisa and I have talked about this before, shame really is a feeling that has no purpose. And as Lisa calls it, is not our teacher, right? Shame is there to really pull us back in, to make us afraid and to hold us back. Guilt, guilt has a purpose. It may say, hey, you said something that hurt somebody's feelings, you need to go back and like apologize or whatever. But shame really tries to keep us from moving forward and coming back to our true self and moving through this world with our giftedness. And so I love that you recognize when you shared something, even though it felt scary and you may not be fully ready, how it actually gave you a sense of freedom and connection that, you wouldn't have had if you had not shared that. So I think that's a beautiful story to go along with the concept of ego and shame, which you've just, reiterated their tightly wound bond that they like to hold. So yeah.
Yes, they really are. I mean, more often than not, they have this interesting conversational relationship. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the, your tarot and astrology journey, and I'm so interested in that because talk about ego work. You have to be doing a lot of ego work to be on a platform, where people, follow you, engage with you, give feedback, positive and negative. And Christine and I have talked about that as a creative, getting that feedback and how that affects the ego and can cause wounding. So I'm very excited to hear about the ego work that you've done around stepping onto a public platform.
Yeah, and that's one that's really interesting for me because I think it's gotten deeper the more years I've done it. I'm almost 6 years in to being like on YouTube and really being in that space. And I think as I get deeper into it, the more I see where I'm needing to like let go and just let myself be who I am, because I've gotten more authentic as I continue to do the work and peeled off more layers and just kind of show up as I am more and more, which challenges the wounded part of me that feels like I need to hide in the perfect performance. And even recently, I've had some comments that came up and just totally, normally I would just brush them off. I don't really mind, but they just completely overtook me. I just thought, oh my gosh, they're probably right. And went all the way back there. And I had to really sit with that and look at that because it made me realize and have like a deeper understanding too of the energetics of that critical voice, because it mirrors my critical voice. It mirrors my self-shaming, and it all has a similar tone. And there was something that happened where it just clicked for me just in the last couple of months about that tone and how it's shared by, a stranger on the internet commenting, and by that weird shame triggered wounded ego protection voice, how much they share that. And I think it's actually helped me recognize the tone and quality of that voice much more clearly than ever before, which was a very exciting breakthrough because now I feel like I can separate it out. I can understand what that voice is inside of me as well as outside of me.
Yes. I love that. I mean, that really kind of goes to, and there's so many synchronicities to some of the conversations we've had in previous talks on the Ego Project, where we talk about, when we have our feelings hurt, when something hits us and somebody says something, really that's going back into that ego of what part of this do I believe to be true, because it won't hurt us if there's not some component of it that we believe is not true, right? We could move through it. If we would be like, that is so ridiculous, why is somebody saying that? But when it hits us, there's somewhere in that subconscious that we've believed a message about that. And so I love that you're able, when you talk about the tone of feeling of the criticism coming, right? What is that really? and that's such a beautiful testament to needing to do this work, especially when you're on a platform that you are on, because, you are here to share something, your purpose is moving in this way, right? And being in that space, you're going to receive those messages that other people, are coming at with, because they haven't done their own ego work, right? And so being aware of not shutting that down, but checking back in with yourself and being like, what part do I need to heal a little bit more, because this hits me in a place that it feels true, but I know it's not, So I think so amazing that you've already started that, and have become more and more aware of it the more you do,
Yeah. The more I am really sharing my truest self, which has been something that's been evolving my whole life, and it just keeps getting more intense and raw and real, the more it actually hits into the true vulnerability. So yes, the layers keep going.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I thought I had worked that out, but no, it's still little remnants there.
Yes, exactly. But the breakthroughs come too at such a more potent and profound level every time you hit into that next one. So yes,
which is the beauty of your calling and your purpose, is that you have everything you need to move through those, and how each time you become more and more aware, you're protected by, already doing some of that work previously. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I would say that going and putting yourself out on a public platform, it is weirdly healing, because you really do have to look at those places of ego that aren't in healthy functioning. And I mean, it's a very efficient way.
Right? It'll put that spotlight on it for sure, especially when you're out there showing, moving with the purpose, right? Moving with your own giftedness. And in that, you are coming back more to your true self, right? And that is very different than being out there as, an actor, or, or playing a piece of music, or doing a choreographed dance that wasn't of your own, right? This is very different, because this is all coming from one place. So
yeah.
But
Yes.
having watched you, that was one of the things that drew me to your YouTube channel, was the authenticity of it. And you come through as, this is you, and once again, very unapologetic about it. And like you said, it's been a journey. You didn't start off, you've done ego work as you've moved along your path. What have you seen for your channel as you find that you're getting more authentic, more vulnerable, sharing? I know that you just went through a big move, you went through a life transition, and you were very open about it. You shared that, and I was like, love that. And you gave people permission to be like, yeah, I'm not doing great right now, and that's okay. Right? Yeah. And so what have you seen as far as the growth of your channel, of your clients? I know you have an amazing Patreon community. What have you seen happen as you get more authentic, more vulnerable, more open?
This has been a really interesting journey, and I feel like I'm just at the beginning of this next chapter of it. So it's all a big exploration. What I have noticed is that when in the early years, when I was doing a little bit more standard stuff and kind of figuring out my voice in this space, it was much more big community, lots of attention, lots of noise. And now my work, it's really resonating with the right people. So it's not as viral, it's not as poppy and pop culture-y, which is sensitive, right? It's we all want that insatiable hunger to have more and more and more. But for me, what I've been really noticing, it's about that resonance. And it goes really deep, and it's really powerful. And yeah, my Patreon community has gotten really deep. The comments are just rich. And that's been just feeling a lot more true for me. I can really be present for that. I don't feel so dispersed. I'm not trying to be as many things. And so it has a very different energetic quality more than anything, I would say, in this new chapter. I'm very curious to see where that's going to take us. But yeah, it's been really interesting stepping out of wanting to be popular and stepping into wanting to be resonant with myself and with all the people that are going to resonate with it. Yeah.
I think that's so amazing because, when we talk about ego and we also talk about being an empath, ultimately on those hierarchy of needs, right, is that connection and that belonging, right? And especially being an empath, when you feel and sense so much of the energy and emotions around you, oftentimes to the scarcity or lack of other people really even understanding their own, right? It can be a very isolating place. And so, to really start getting that, moving in that direction where that belonging and that connection feels very authentic. I think that's a beautiful testament to becoming more refined in your own giftedness, and how popularity isn't necessarily bringing that connection and belonging with it. And that in and of itself is ego work that you do when you start putting yourself out there like you have, right? You feel like the popularity would satisfy, but as you start, becoming more refined in that, you're like, oh, but this feels very satisfying. This feels very connecting. And I feel like so many people are craving that in this world right now, that authentic connection and belonging that you can't get by being anything other than authentic.
Yeah. And it is true that like constant hunger for more and more and more, as far as like more views or more subscribers. I think anybody who's been on YouTube and like has had a bubble of some success in the metrics of that, it's tricky because you think and actually what ends up happening is it's such an empty feeling. You hit that number, you hit that thing, and then there's nothing really there for it. There's nothing really with you in that. And you really find that out. I really found that out. And I had to really, in this whole journey, I've had to look at that and think about what I'm doing, why it matters, and if it's really lining up with me many times. Yeah.
And I think we do live in a culture where everybody wants to be a celebrity. And so the numbers and the count and the views and the likes and all that stuff is constantly talking in the background, so to hear successful stories such as yourself with, a great community behind you, but that you had to go through that kind of purification process of, I've got to release this concept in order to get what is true and what is right and what is where I'm supposed to be. I think, more people that are putting themselves out there, I think they need to hear that message. And that is ego work in and of itself, right? The false belief systems that we're told, if I'm popular, then I'll be loved, then I'll be worthy, then I'll be valuable.
Absolutely. Then I'll have security and stability. That was a big one for me. There's kind of this mythological number or something that then I'll have stability forever. And yeah, it just isn't that way.
As an artist, stability, right? You're hungry for it. Like it's everything. And I don't think they're a good partnership.
Well, it forces you to find a new definition of stability.
Exactly.
And that one that is a practice, because you have to keep going to your center. Capital S self, man. It's just the practice with that, because it's an illusion for all of us, this idea of consistency of circumstance. So
really, absolutely. Our definition is so contingent on so many other variables that we don't really take into account. And I think that's something, Lisa and myself, we're all entrepreneurs as well. So I think we have to constantly, like you said, come back to, redefining what does security and stability really mean for me right now,
Yeah.
I love that right now. I think there is that desire of like, Sarah so beautifully put, like I get stability and then everything's going to be fine, right? And smooth sailing from here. And it's like, right now, what do I need right now to help me feel grounded and stable and have structure for myself? I love that. Yeah.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
one of the challenges for me as far as doing this on a platform is, I'm a writer, I'm an introvert, I really enjoy my own company, but I've been, over the last few years, been feeling like I'm being pushed, almost like a step out, be seen, step out, right? And so I'm doing a lot of ego work through this process. My comfort zone is, well, me with my computer and my pajamas and, preferably a cat somewhere near me. And that's, and that's pretty much it. And then, but to do this, there's so much reward on the other side, yet it's not in my comfort zone. So I'm kind of curious about, as an artist and an empath, I think, am I reading that correctly? Is that sound resonate with you as well?
Yes. Yes, 100%. I mean, just today I ended up just staying at home and getting some work done, and it just felt so good. It's always been my happy place. I'm right there with you. And it is, you do have to find that little bit of like courage and adrenaline to put, your face out there, because it feels so good to just be creating in my happy little interior world. I mean, that's always going to be my happy place. But I was just thinking today about how, for me, those are the sentences of my life. Those are all the words and sentences, but the punctuation really matters. And it's about finding the punctuation that I want in that cycle, and just kind of thinking about it in that way. Because without the punctuation, it's just me. I start to get really discombobulated. I'm just floating around out there.
Yeah. And it can get misinterpreted, right? I mean, punctuation is what helps define meaning, so wow.
Yeah.
Well, and there's that floating around out there has such an appeal.
It's
so
the best.
So
And I mean, I think that's part of it. I think that I've kind of tried to learn to invite the floating along into the world with me. Like, instead of having this kind of divisiveness, it's like, oh, that floating along people are interested in that and value that. So like, how do I weave that into whatever I'm creating in here? Because that is my happy place. Pretty much my goal is always to go back to the floating.
Right.
So how do I invite that more into everything I'm doing? And the energetics of it.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's finding that sweet spot, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm always shooting for. It's like, because I love to float. I like our languaging, and we both understand. I think Christine does as well, what that means, right? But I also love to build.
Yeah.
And I'm always a create, and I'm always seeking that sweet spot. And whenever I get too far on one side or too far on the other, then what you said about checking in with my body, I feel anxious. I feel something's wrong. I start externalizing outside of me, paying attention to what other people are doing. Anytime I'm doing that, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm out of balance. Back to me. Yeah. So I love that. So Christine, with clients that come in to see you that are empaths, can you give us some insight into them? I know I'm curious. I don't know, Sarah, this is
yeah.
for you. Yeah. Like, how do you guide them?
Well, I think for people who come in, into the therapeutic room as empaths, some of them are just, aware that they consider themselves very sensitive, that they are very emotional. Again, they have the wounding vernacular that there's something wrong with that, right? Like, I'm just super emotional, I'm very sensitive. So a lot of people come into the therapeutic room not really understanding that is part of their true self and it's part of their giftedness, but they are operating oftentimes within the shadows of that facet of them. And so in therapy, depending on what it is that their presenting concerns are, we start shifting their perspective into more of how how is this a benefit for you? When you are sensing something, how are you processing through that? Where are you giving yourself, the honor it needs to be able to own that and honor it and validate those feelings, right? Oftentimes, when people are empaths in childhood, they come into this world, being sensitive and empathic and here to serve from that place and be in that purpose. But they get, the internalizing story that there's something wrong with that. And if I could just, then people would not feel I'm too much, or I should just learn to, right? And that internalizing story occurs, and we see empaths typically move into oftentimes relationships that they develop more codependent behaviors and tendencies because they don't want to be too much, right? So in the therapeutic relationships, it's really about bringing them back, right, to the body and seeing what the body is actually saying when they are having these experiences. What about that exchange are you sensitive to? Was it uncomfortable? Did it feel disrespectful, right? And give them the vocabulary of their feelings. And then also teaching them what is theirs and what is somebody else's. Which ones can they own and which ones can they receive, but process through it and release it back. And that's hard work, but it is coming back home for them when they can start understanding that their highly, sensing perspectives is actually a gift that they have. And it is, but it is also to be used with honoring self as well, and not at the benefit of everybody else, which can happen, especially when you put yourself out there for purpose with that. People are like, let me just dump and give you all this energy and you do with it what you feel like you need to. Right. So, I have to say therapy is a beautiful place for empaths to come to, as is, going and seeking some spiritual and energetic guidance, because it brings meaning to things. And that for an empath is especially for somebody who is so new in the journey, meaning can bring you back home, and it's a great opportunity to sit with people who know how to help guide you to that place.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And Sarah, for you, you have a large community that you work with, and I'm assuming the majority of them are empathic. Am I accurate about that?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So how do you work with them? Like, how do you guide the people that are part of your community?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so fun because in my own search for tools, there's a really great convergence between a lot of therapeutic models and the work that I do. I think they just work really, really well together. So a lot of what I suggest will actually completely overlap with a lot of what you will do in, internal family systems and other things like this, where you're really getting in touch with listening and getting in tune with what's really going on. So yeah, it is a lot about, like I said, those micro practices, checking in for 1 or 2 minutes, and really developing a language for how you can commune with your accessing that true self. So yeah, it's all about building language. And I think I'm a big proponent of finding a way to describe it for yourself, like giving it new words and new textures, maybe things you didn't have access to in your childhood growing up. And so really getting into the creativity of it as well, and how fun that can be to create the internal world that works for you. Yeah.
Oh, that
I love
was
that
so
texture.
good.
I love the concept of textures, when you're coming back to yourself, right? How does this feel, not only from an emotional perspective, but within the environmental world, what is the texture that this feels like, and bringing in, art is a great place for that, or music, or whatever the modality may be, being able to translate it in that way.
Yeah, I feel like so much of the joy and the creativity of healing is just like seeing how much you can translate. How much of this can I translate and find like language for, either in painting or music or words or
Mhm.
movement, however you want to do it. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun.
Love that. Yeah. Oh,
I love that, the use of the fun and enjoyment, and it's exciting and creative. Those words, so often we look at, being, yeah, empaths as the negative, the shadow side, as Christine said. And I love the languaging that you use around it, of this is a positive thing. Let's shift that lens, and let's really look at this as something that we can, one, I think we're all moving into, we're going to see a lot more of it. And so I love that, both Sarah and Christine, you both have, platforms that people can seek help, so, and support. So I love that. Sarah, I'm going to ask you this question. So what is one piece of advice you would love to give empaths out there where ego work is concerned?
Ooh, wow. Pay attention to the judging voice.
mhm.
Learn what it sounds like. Get to know it. Give it a name. Have fun with that. The more you can recognize this voice, it goes back to what Christine was saying about building language and knowing how to come back to self, all of that. That can only happen if we find a way to understand and know the judge, the protector, the guardian, all that, can show up in many varieties, because that is often, where the shame will come from being sensitive, where it will feel embarrassing, where you don't want to share, or where it feels like you are judging yourself for needing a break because your equipment is tired. All of that will just free you to be at peace. That's it. Just get to know that voice, look for it, get used to the tone of it, so you can pick it out.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
so
And
good.
you'll be like, whoa, I know what that, oh, I heard, I know who that is.
Exactly. It's like you could almost have like a safe word. It's like, oh, here it is.
I like a safe word with your judger voice. I like that.
Right.
That's good.
I think that's great advice.
Like a touch tree or something like that, where you can touch and remember that's not the whole of your reality. I just, like Christine said, so many empaths just struggling in this version of culture, that there's so much shame, and there are very few tools. I mean, they're getting more popular and it's awesome. TikTok is filled with that, and therapeutic models have come, like last 20 years, it's been wild.
Right.
But still, it's not the mainstream. It's not going to be shown in film. It's not going to be shown in a lot of the visuals that come at you. So it's very important to get that judge voice out of the way, so you can just be.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
such
you don't get
great
stuck
advice.
in
I
it.
love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So Sarah, thank you so much. Now, if people want to follow you and join your Patreon, how can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. It's at Sarah Vrba. You can find me on my website, sarahvrba.com. And you can find me on my YouTube and Patreon. So basically, if you just look up for my name, I am there under my name everywhere. So I should be pretty easy to find.
Great. And I'll go ahead and we'll put your links in our information as well, so people
Awesome.
can find you there. And once again, thank you so much. We would love to have you back. I think we would have many more things to talk about, the three of us. What do you think, Christine?
Oh, 100%. I've already been watching the videos. I've been on her Instagram. I'm like, I need more and more and more. So
Oh, that's awesome. Yes, I would love to come back. It's been so great to talk with both of you. It's like, yes, you're all kindred spirits here.
Exactly. All right, everyone. So we are going to go ahead and sign off. Make sure to subscribe and to like, and check Sarah out, please. She is just a font of wisdom and insight and authenticity, which, what a fabulous word, right? Okay, so Christine, do you have anything to add?
I don't. So excited to have you on, and like Lisa said, like your energy is everything, and I want to soak more and more of it up.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. It's been so much fun coming here today. Like truly, I've had such a great time. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.